Hello, I'm Bob Orr, and this is Washington Unplugged. Today we're largely talking about the rising tensions between North Korea and the U.S. President Obama just a short time ago held a press conference with South Korean President Lee in the White House Rose Garden. CBS Chief White House Correspondent Reid was there, and Chip, there was no question the two presidents presented a united front today.
Oh, absolutely. They made very clear that they will do what has to be done to keep the Korean Peninsula denuclearized. Didn't go into any specifics, though. That always, of course, raises the question, what really are they willing to do? Would the United States ever go to war again in Korea if it had to, if it really came down to that? Those, of course, are questions that are for another day, but they made very clear that they believe North Korea and its nuclear program create a grave threat, not just to the peninsula, but to the world at large. And they were, as you said, very much in agreement that they need to stand together, and so does the rest of the world, against North Korea. Pretty tough language. I mean, you said a grave threat, and we did hear the president say that. Hang in there 1 second, because Nick Szechenyi from the Center for Strategic and International Studies is also with us. Nick, thanks for coming in. Why should we treat this any differently than what we've seen in the past? Kim Jong-il from time to time acts up. He seems to cause a lot of problems, and then he gets placated with food or some kind of supplies.
Well, in 2006, the last time the North Koreans tested a nuclear weapon, it was widely believed that they were testing missiles and weapons to try to get concessions from the U.S. and other countries, basically economic aid, to keep the regime afloat. This time, however, there's a different objective. I think the North Koreans really want to have a viable missile and weapons program. And each time they're able to test these things, there's a risk that they can export the technology to other countries and perhaps even terrorists or non-state actors. So it's a little different this time, and therefore the strong message that the president and his counterpart from South Korea sent today is very important.
You mentioned the possibility of exporting military parts, maybe even nuclear parts or some kind of nuclear material. And Chip, I know you asked the president specifically about that, about this idea of interdicting shipments at sea, but it didn't seem to me like he completely answered the question. What is going on there?
Well, according to reports that are out there today, basically the U.S. is going to intercept ships at sea, but they are going to draw limits on what they can do, only go on, not forcibly go on board. But when those ships then go to another port, they're going to do everything they can diplomatically to try to get anything that was on that ship inspected. So it's going to be an aggressive effort, but it's not going to go so far as engaging in what North Korea has called an act of war, actually forcing their way onto these ships and inspecting them. But you're right, the president didn't really answer the question, number one, exactly what's going to happen here, and number two, might even what they're planning, not going all the way to forcing themselves on board, might what they're planning be enough to provoke North Korea to higher levels of hostility? You know, it just seems that whatever you do with North Korea, it provokes them, and it has the opposite effect of what a lot of people would like it to have.
This is a UN policy, but apparently not all the details have been completely worked out. That's kind of a work in progress.
Exactly.
Nick, I was going to ask you, it seems that you said they're serious, and it seems that we've seen a couple of things. They launched some rockets, and then on May 25th they did this underground test. And we just heard yesterday that was a pretty sizable test. What's the message there?
Well, again, I think they're committed to reaching the point where they feel that their nuclear weapons program is viable. And if you link it to the missile program, the ultimate fear is that the North Koreans might try to miniaturize a nuclear device and place it in a missile and aim it at South Korea, our other ally Japan, or possibly even the United States. So that's a major security concern. There's also a domestic political element to this. The leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-il, is quite sick. And there are several reports suggesting that he's trying to pass the baton to one of his sons. And to make that transition smoother, a demonstration of bravado, technological capability, helps him do that. So there's also a domestic political element which complicates the situation further.
And William Lin, the Assistant Secretary of Defense, on the Hill today, he said something that got people's attention. He said that if they continue with their capabilities, they may have a missile that could strike the continental U.S. We haven't really heard that before.
No, it's a technical capability. They have a long-range missile that to this point could reach Alaska. But again, you know, it's a grave threat, so you don't want to just think about those things in hypothetical terms. So it's something we have to deal with seriously. A defensive measure in regard to that is missile defense, something that the U.S. and Japan, for example, cooperate closely on to prevent that from becoming a reality. So there are several things going on, and the Obama administration has to keep an eye on all these fronts.
Nick, thanks for joining us today, and Chip, thank you too. Chip, while you're on the horn with us here, what do you got planned for the evening news tonight?
Well, we're going to be looking at financial regulation. The second question I asked was to try to get the president to step on what he was going to say, what he is going to say tomorrow when he lays out his financial regulation plan. So we'll use some of what he said here and then some other information we're getting from sources in the administration to advance that story as much as we can.
Even when he said he wouldn't step on his own story,
he sure did.
He kind of did. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
All right, Chip, Reid, thanks very much, and Nick Szechenyi, thanks again for coming in. Of course, another global hotspot is Iran. 7 people overnight were shot in what started as a peaceful rally. Of course, all of that in protest to the contested elections there. Since then, foreign reporters have been told they cannot cover the rallies any longer. Our Liz Palmer, though, was there and called into the early show earlier today. Take a listen to Liz's report.
Good morning. Iran's Guardian Council has ordered a recount in contested areas, although it's hard to see how a limited recount would reverse President Ahmadinejad's sweeping victory. Last night, the Interior Ministry finally released a breakdown of the vote. Those who've been saying it was rigged will be doing some serious number crunching today to see if they can find any proof.
Liz Palmer reporting from Iran earlier today. Well, that is Washington Unplugged for today. CBSNews.com's new daily political webcast. We'll see you here again tomorrow at the same time, 12:30. Thanks for watching, everybody.